Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our April Conservative Women's Network. Those of you here in pollen-saturated Northern Virginia, and those of you watching on C-SPAN. I'm Michelle Easton, president of the Clare, Boothe, Luce Center for Conservative Women, and it's great to see you all. This CWN actually began 23 years ago, and it brings women from all over this area, DC, Washington, and Maryland, and sometimes even further, to come together and hear from conservative women leaders and writers discussing key issues, and then afterwards we get to network at lunch. Now, to introduce today's speaker, Bethany Mandel. Bethany will be talking about her best-selling book, Stolen Youth: How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence and Indoctrinating a Generation. The key idea that I have discerned from your book is that our children are not all right. And too many children today are miserable. They've been indoctrinated to question every building block of society, from all the different areas: education, medicine, entertainment, culture, and other areas. The idea that we can just be good parents creating healthy and happy home environments is not enough anymore. Parents have to know more and do more to ensure their children are protected and don't get trapped in today's overwhelming left-wing indoctrination. That's also a theme of my book, Bethany. It's called How to Raise a Conservative Daughter, that the good old days of moms and dads, just sitting back and watching their children grow up are gone. And the focus of our institute here, the Luce Center, is to prepare young women for motherhood and future leadership in the country, introducing them to great conservative role models like Bethany, to give them deeper knowledge on critical issues, and to develop in them more confidence and courage, what they need to stand up and speak out, and to raise informed and conservative children. Bethany has an impressive resume. She's a columnist for Fox News, a contributing writer for Deseret News, an editor of Heroes of Liberty, which is a children's book series, and a homeschooling mother of 6. And we have a number of children with us today, and it's a pleasure to have them all here, including some of yours. She's also often a guest on talk radio and on television. She's been on Fox, on One America News Network, and Newsmax. She's written extensively wonderful articles and pieces for the New York Times, the New York Post, the Washington Post, the Washington Examiner, Newsweek, Spectator, and more. Now, she graduated from Rutgers University, which we were just talking, is probably the most radical feminist university in America. And she had a degree in history and Jewish studies. And she lives now with her husband and her 6 children, aged 9 years old to 2 months, in Maryland. Following today's talk by Bethany, and we'll do a little Q&A, please join us for lunch right next door here. And her book is available for purchase, and she's graciously agreed to sign her books for you if you like. So now, please join me in welcoming Bethany Mandel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It was a childhood dream of mine to be on C-SPAN, so I can check off this box. And I don't even have to say anything. I can just say I've been on C-SPAN and walk off, and I will have achieved that life dream. But I'll try to actually be entertaining while on C-SPAN, which is something that is, it's an accomplishment. Worst comes to worst, I'll bring one of my kids on, and it'll be like a prop, and it'll be fine. So I wanted to, I don't know if you guys know Bari Weiss. In October of 2021, she gave, I think, one of the best performances on CNN that I think that I've ever seen. She was on Brian Stelter's show, of blessed memory, as the Jews say, a now defunct show called Reliable Sources. And she was sort of informing and educating him and his viewership about wokeness in the media. And he played dumb, as he's very good at. And he said, well, I don't understand what you're talking about. And she had to really sort of spell it out for him, how wokeness impacted her work in the New York Times newsroom and what why she ended up leaving the New York Times. And so I just want to read for you a little bit of her speech because it was one of the most powerful moments, I think, in network television in the last couple of years. So she told Brian, "When you have the chief reporter on the beat of COVID for the New York Times talking about how questioning or pursuing the question of the lab leak is racist, the world has gone mad. When you're not able to say out loud and in public that there are differences between men and women, the world has gone mad. When we're not allowed to acknowledge that rioting is rioting and it is bad, and that silence is not violence, but violence is violence, the world has gone mad. When in the name of progress, young school children as young as kindergarten are being separated in public schools because of their race, and it is called progress instead of segregation, the world has gone mad." So she's talking here about the madness that was silencing members of the media and forcing conformity of thought among journalists. But that same madness is also coming for our kids. Adults like me, you, and Barry understand that the world has gone mad and that it's getting crazier by the day. We are watching a cultural revolution take place, and because too many adults are wise to the insanity, the revolutionaries have decided to come for our kids. There's a great deal of attention and a fair number of books focusing on wokeness in colleges and corporations, but ours is the first book that focuses on how this effort is coming for small children. Kids don't arrive at school and begin the brainwashing process there. They've been brainwashed since kindergarten or earlier. We wrote Stolen Youth to wake parents up about the indoctrination that's coming for our kids. So I want to share for you a story from the introduction of our book. I want to say it's one of my favorite stories, but it's sort of a weird thing to say. But when I spoke to this woman, I said, this is exactly the kind of person that I wanted to talk to for this book and exactly the story that I wanted to tell in it. As you may imagine, I had to give pretty much everyone in the book a sort of pseudonym because people didn't feel comfortable using their names for obvious reasons related to, the mob coming for them. So her name, for our purposes, is Allison, and she's from the Boston area. She had a daughter, Alyssa, who was struggling a bit socially and academically in 2020. And then COVID hit. And it's always the line. And then COVID hit, and then things sort of spiraled. She stayed isolated in her room on her devices, and her parents kind of thought, whatever keeps her busy, we're all locked down, we're in triage mode. But what ended up happening was she spiraled. She stayed in her room all the time, and it was dark. When she returned to school 2 days a week, it didn't improve the situation, and in October of 2020, she discovered that her daughter Alyssa was not only cutting, but she was also suicidal. Every single outpatient facility for troubled youth was still on Zoom. This is October of 2020. 6 months into a pandemic that we understood by now did not put anyone under the age of 40 at significant risk. All of these programs still decided that they were best operating on Zoom. And so there was one program that was inpatient that would take their daughter, but, there was always a but, they had to drop her off masked outside, and they couldn't interact with anyone within the program. So the scene, if you can imagine these parents who have just been through hell with their daughter, they drop her off with strangers at the gate, masked. She's supposed to stay for only 10 days, but she ended up staying for over 3 weeks. So this is what happened next, Allison explained to me. Our daughter looked like she was in a prison. She wouldn't talk to us, and the psychiatrist did all the talking for her. Again, keep in mind this is on Zoom, and everyone is in a mask. She wouldn't talk to us, and in one session, the psychiatrist prompted her, "Alyssa, do you have something that you want to tell your parents?" And she sat silently, and then the psychiatrist announced for her that Alyssa had decided that she was non-binary. We asked, where is this coming from? We were dumbfounded. It didn't sound anything like her. We knew that there were issues, but I don't know if she thought if it was an escape or a cool thing to do because she had been watching it on YouTube or TikTok. That was a theme that popped up again and again in my research. This was something that the kids picked up on YouTube or TikTok. And it just so happened that 8 other kids in the program had already announced that they were non-binary as well. Not a big program, 8 kids, what are the odds? The psychiatrist kept recommending books and resources to support Alyssa through her change. Alyssa went on venting. She was groomed. We think that she was groomed to be this way. It came out of the blue. When she came home, you would think that, we can sort of deprogram her a little bit and focus on what led her to that inpatient facility in the first place, her mental health struggle. It was not the case. They faced another enemy in their fight to save their daughter, the school. Allison explained. When she went back to school, the public school helped this process along. They helped to groom her. They came to me and said that Alyssa wanted to change her name to Corey. We're going to look into changing her records. Her mother refused, but it didn't matter. Allison explained, they will do whatever the kids say. It doesn't matter what parents say. She was Corey, and she used they, them pronouns. They didn't give a darn what I said. She didn't use the word darn, but I will edit myself for C-SPAN. You're welcome, everyone. The key takeaway was that she really wanted me to drive home in my book was this. What happened to her family can happen to any family. Her daughter was particularly vulnerable, and they took advantage of that vulnerability. The inpatient program started the whole thing, and the schools just went along. They don't care. The school is so involved in politics and in pushing their agenda. And to us, as parents, we feel like we have no control. So the worst part of writing a book of this nature that's sort of timely is that eventually you just have to say, we're done. You have to close the book and hit print and send it to your publisher and your copy editor. And my publisher was not thrilled with me because at the 11th hour when we got our 26th draft, I said, can I just add like 100 words? Just 100. I feel like that's not a lot. Publisher thought it was a lot and did not let me. But there's this impulse to constantly be adding because every single day there is another story in the news that happens. And so one of my Twitter followers joked that this New York Magazine piece that came up last week should be in our paperback edition, which, I mean, if we're rewriting for the paperback edition, we're just gonna have to rewrite the whole book. But I wanna read you from this piece in New York Magazine by a woman named Sarah Jones, and the title is Children Are Not Property. If you have free time and like okay blood pressure, go and read it. If you don't have okay blood pressure, don't read it because it is borderline infuriating / a little bit entertaining, depending on your mood that day. But I want to read you just one paragraph from this New York Mag piece. So the premise is that children are not property. Because parents own their children, they can dispose of the child as they see fit. They can deny them evidence-based medical care. I think you know what evidence-based medical care she's talking about. They can put a child to work. My 9-year-old babysitting in the back right now, so I don't know, maybe she's not wrong. They can make sure a child is sheltered from the dangers of a serious education. Just like marinate on that for a moment, I'm gonna get back to it. Sheltered from the dangers of a serious education. When a child goes hungry, that's because a parent isn't caring for their property. And what a person does with their property is their right. Does that sound like any conservative parent you know? Or just like starving our children and putting them to work in sweatshops. But that's their image of us. That's that in their imagination, that's how we treat our children. They are props. There was one amazing line also from that piece that, parents, conservative parents love their children insofar as they can perpetuate their anti-LGBT bigotry. That was another great line. It was really hard to select one line for this speech, but go and read it. It's amazing. So they think that parents are the enemy and that the experts should be left in charge of the sacred work of child rearing, raised with morals that conform to their radicalized moral compass. I think that we all met those experts over the course of the last few years. They're the experts that told us that 2-year-olds should wear cloth masks for 8 hours a day. Those are amazing experts. Yeah. So the author believes that children don't belong to their parents, but insofar as she's making that argument, she is making the argument that they instead belong to the collective, to the state. And when I was telling my husband about this, I'm going to go off the script for a second here. When I was fuming to my husband about this piece, I said, and by the way, BT Dub, he helped me edit this book. It's not like he's never heard me vent about this before. He's an amazing editor, Washington Examiner magazine. Check it out. But I said, this is they think that they belong to the state. And he said, well, this is just some wacko New York Mag author, slow your roll, calm down, chill out. And I was like, honey, you edited the book. this isn't some fringe view. So I yelled at him. I didn't yell. I was just talking loudly and quickly. But I told him this. In Washington State, we're about to see a law. It's going through the legislature, and the governor's about to sign it. And the law I'm going to read you from Senate Bill 5599. It allows host homes for runaway youth, and they house youth without parental permission. Furthermore, the host homes don't need to notify parents about where their children are or if they're getting medical interventions. These protected medical health care services include gender-affirming care. For minors, arbitrarily decided anything prescribed by a doctor to treat gender dysphoria. So just imagine for a moment that you're a parent in Seattle. Your kid has gone missing. Like Alyssa, they're struggling with their mental health, and you don't know where they are, and you don't know what's happening. And you're just hoping that they're safe on the streets. And I'm not sure what's worse, the fact that your child could be on the streets or that they're in a state-sponsored group home getting hormones that can render them infertile, or worse. One of the chapters in our book, we say that we're using kids as guinea pigs in a wide variety of ways. And the use of puberty blockers is one of the most horrific. Alyssa, who was cutting, I'm 37. My generation, girls have always had mental health struggles in their preteen years. The difference is when you were anorexic, when you were 16, or cutting, no one in a professional capacity, whether they were your teachers or your principal or your doctor or your psychiatrist, told you, yeah, you do look fat. Yeah, you do. And let's figure out how to get you on a diet. That is what we're doing to young girls. We are perpetuating their dysphoria. And dysphoria comes in many forms when you're growing up as a preteen girl and coming into your body. But the difference in now versus when I was a teen 20 years ago is that people in positions of authority are encouraging young girls to continue the medicalization of their dysphoria. All right, so California, there's another bill, Assembly Bill 665, that would allow children as young as 12 to consent to mental health treatment or counseling without parental approval or involvement. There's a similar bill in the Colorado legislature. It's happening around the country. It's not a fringe view that the state knows better. It is happening around the country, and we're going to see more and more bills like these. If you look at birth rates by ideological persuasion, you'll see that it's not progressives having children. They're entrenched in anti-natalist propaganda. There's a reason why when people see me in the street, they know that I'm religious in some way. I have my 6 kids with me. They know I'm religious in some way, and they can almost always guess my politics. Their aim is ideological capture of a generation. This is the revolution that they're trying to foment. But it's not their kids that they're trying to capture. And it's not their kids that they're trying to brainwash. It's ours. In Stolen Youth, we make the argument that this ideological capture is coming from every corner of a child's life, in school, in visual and print media, even at the hands of medical professionals. In our book, Karol, who is a refugee from the Soviet Union, goes over the history of revolutions coming from kids, and then she shifts into COVID, how COVID accelerated their campaign, and how COVID opened the eyes of millions of American parents to what was happening on Zoom school with their kids. For the first time, parents were seeing what kind of ideological instruction, brainwashing, their children were being subjected to. It certainly didn't resemble the serious education that Sarah Jones asserted was being provided in public schools, and the dismal test scores we're seeing literally every single day released further fuel parental distrust of what kind of and quality of education is taking place in government-run schools. If Zoom has taught us nothing, that is the takeaway. And the parents that I've spoken to, I would say 70% are concerned about the quality of education rather than the indoctrination. But my brilliant co-author, Karol Markowicz, says all the time, for every moment that you spend on indoctrination, for every minute that you're not spending it on math. And it really speaks to the priorities of the people writing curriculum in the school system. The subtitle of our book is How Radicals Are Erasing Innocence, and we're seeing every day how radicals are doing their best to eradicate innocence. When I wrote this part of my speech, I decided that my children should be elsewhere. And so if you have children listening at home, you might want to turn something on YouTube. We're watching pornography being placed into school libraries, and children's book authors like Judy Blume are defending it. That was just yesterday. Yeah. She initially had defended J.K. Rowling, and then she got hit by the mob that's coming for J.K. Rowling, and she backtracked and said, I am against book banning. Look at the books. Look at the books that they're accusing us of banning. They are pornographic. There are videos of parents trying to read from these books at school board meetings, and their mics are being turned off because they are that graphic. Parents have tried to hold up images of these books, and they're trying to portray us as bigots. The people who are writing these books are writing in homosexual relationships. And I think that no parent wants their 9-year-old to read about, and this is a story I tell in the book, she was 8 then. My 8-year-old picked up a graphic novel in which 2 girls at a sleepover have an encounter. I don't want my 8-year-old reading a graphic novel about 2 girls at a sleepover having an encounter with anyone, not with each other, not with a brother, no one. It's not appropriate. But they're using LGBT characters in order to say, if you don't want your child to do this, you're a bigot. If you don't want your child at a drag queen story hour, it's because you hate drag queens. No, I don't want Hooters story hour either. None of these things are appealing to me. I'm a bigot, so be it. So, in their imagining, children can consent to puberty blockers and surgical mutilation. They are adult enough and mature enough to make these decisions with their bodies. But game that out for a minute. If they are mature enough to alter their genitalia, they are mature enough to use it. This is something that I went into in our book and, quite frankly, did not go into enough. The idea that if children can consent to sex changes, they can consent to sex. And, yes, it came to light yesterday that the United Nations, the International Commission of Jurists, published a report in March claiming that, and I'm going to quote, sexual conduct involving persons below the domestically prescribed minimum age of consent to sex may be consensual, in fact, if not in law. So to put it more simply, the UN thinks that adults should be allowed to have sex with minors. It makes sense according to their worldview. If children can consent to altering their sexuality and are able to choose it as young as toddlers, why can't they consent to sexual activity? There is no limiting principle to this madness. Think about sort of everything that's happened over the course of the last, I would say, 10 years. Abortion? What is the limiting principle? I'm going to veer off for a second. When people ask conservatives, what's your limiting principle? 6 weeks, 15 weeks, 20 weeks? The question that you respond with as a pro-life individual is, what is your limiting principle? At what point do you think that a child in the womb should be safe? And their answer, more often than not, is up until the moment of birth. But we are the extremists. I digress. Innocence and happiness are the enemy of the woke. The radical progressive left want to completely remake society and start a revolution. You can't do that. You can't ideologically capture America's youth if they are happy and contented. The rates of childhood mental illness and misery is a feature of this ideology. It is how they achieve their ends. It has terrified children of imminent climate catastrophe and uses them as pawns in their media campaigns. Greta Thunberg. My co-author goes into how her first grade son was more or less forced to participate in a climate march, first grade, as part of his school. I experienced that at Rutgers University, speaking of the radicalness. We were also given time off from class to march against something. I don't know. I mean, it all kind of runs together. I was an adult, and I could confront my professor, which I did, and I said, I have figured out, according to how much this class is per semester, how much each class session is worth. So I'm wondering, are you going to be providing me with a reimbursement for this class that we're missing? He did not. But I was an adult, and I was able to confront my teacher. A first grader is not. And so that's why they're shifting from indoctrinating 18-year-olds to 8-year-olds. They want them to be basket cases, and that's what they're getting. But you also can't achieve this revolution without bullying your enemies into silence. This is a calling card of the angry left. We see it every time anyone speaks up against their ideology. My book was published by Daily Wire Books. I'm not sure if you guys saw what happened to Matt Walsh this week. He is a conservative columnist and podcaster for the Daily Wire, and he had his entire digital life hacked. 20 years of emails, everything was hacked. Ben Shapiro, the sort of head of the Daily Wire, said that they've had to hire 24/7 security for Matt's house. Ben has had that for years. I've received threats. Karol has received threats. My co-author, Karol Markowicz, once over COVID, she had someone put a sign on her front door, her actual home, her front door. This is how they bully all of us into silence. And it's why attendees at our private and unpublicized book party were assaulted in New York City last month. Vanessa, who's out there walking with her baby, had some choice words for the folks that did that. But they showed up and started throwing their drinks and our books at us. I had my 2-month-old with me at the time, who, thank God, one of my friends was holding him at that moment. But this is how they try to intimidate us. And I'm not going to lie and say that we've not had moments of like, why am I doing this? Why am I subjecting myself to this? But to be frank, when they assault you physically, you're reminded they are terrified. We are over the target, and that is why we are a target. And even children are subjected to the bullying. So I want to share with you another favorite story. It's a weird way to say it, but I don't know how else to say it. A mother, actually a child, a 10-year-old in Orange County. Again, her name is Hannah. Her name is Hannah. Not really, but whatever. So she went to a sleepover program that was affiliated with her school. And there was a neighboring township that did a similar sleepover program a couple weeks prior. And there were rumors within parents in the area that the girls had ended up in bunks with adult biological male counselors overnight. And the parents, Hannah's parents, and other parents in that school system were concerned. They went to the principal and said, we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. There's not going to be any men in our kids' bunk, right? Our little girls' bunks. And the principal sent her an email back quoting the code. I have written the code here. I'm not going to read it out loud to you. It is legal jargon. It's like when you go to the doctor and they say sign here, and you're like, okay, I don't understand anything I'm saying, but I hope it's all right. And she trusted that the principal understood that they were on the same page, because she made very clear she did not want her daughter in a bunk with anyone who was not biologically female. So she explained in a subsequent email to administrators after her daughter returned from the sleepover. I think you can guess what happened. I'll tell you. I felt completely misled, and what I find most concerning is the lack of information divulged to parents on the matter when our principal was fully aware that this was a possibility. I spoke with the school after my daughter came home from camp. She informed me that of the 65 employees, 4 of them identified as non-binary. They said that the principal was perfectly aware that they could be sleeping with our children, and they could have clarified this as parents when they saw that this was a concern for several of us. And so, who did Hannah spend her weekend with? She didn't sleep, I can tell you that. She spent her weekend with a counselor named Nick. neon green mohawk, arms covered in tattoos, 2 missing teeth, and other teeth that were visibly rotting. Nick had facial hair and announced that Nick had they, them pronouns. And it was something that Hannah didn't understand. She's 10 years old, but she felt too intimidated to ask because of something that had happened to her several weeks prior. She had been bullied in a text message conversation about the fact that she wasn't vaccinated against COVID. And so one of the boys on the text chain called her a lesbian, and in response, as young kids do, she sort of volleyed an epithet back at him and said he was gay. This is what kids do back and forth. My kids are probably like mauling each other in the back right now. A little nervous, to be honest with you. So the principal got a hold of that text message chain, and in response, she was stripped of her title as class president. And so this was a very public humiliation. And so she took from that the lesson that you do not speak up. When there are issues about sexuality, about gender, anything, keep your mouth closed. And so when Nick ended up as her counselor, she laid in her bunk, terrified and sleepless for the entire weekend. And her mother said, I'm the kind of person, this is the lesson that her mother took, I'm the kind of person that gives the benefit of the doubt and is too trusting. This was a wake-up call that I can't trust people, especially with my children. That is the message of the book. They are more concerned about the leaders being comfortable than about my child being comfortable. That is the theme of the book. In the long term, a generation of children, including Hannah's daughter, have learned that they must ignore their internal alarm. Every woman watching this knows what that internal alarm means. It means you're walking down the street and you look behind you and that voice inside of you says run, and you do. And there is a generation of girls that is learning to ignore that voice because maybe that voice is bigoted, maybe that voice is racist, maybe that voice is wrong. That voice is never wrong. We're seeing it happen in locker rooms right now when girls are expressing their desire to not change into swim trunks in front of biological males. We're seeing that bullying. And that is a bullying that happened to Hannah's daughter. Hannah's daughter wasn't the only person who had quieted her internal alarm, and this is something that is an incredibly important point. The principal and every adult at the camp did so too. Everyone knew that this was a bad idea, but no one wanted to question the wisdom of putting someone who was sporting a green mohawk, a sleeve of tattoos, and facial hair in charge of a cabin of girls. It's the job of adults to take care of children, not the other way around. Really want people to marinate on that because throughout our book, we are telling children, COVID is the perfect example. It is your job to take care of the adults. Remember learning about the Titanic as kids and we learned women and children first? That is no longer the case anymore. So, when we were first trying to sell our book proposal, we met with 5 different editors from different publishing houses, and 3 of them expressed interest. And so we wrote a New York Post piece about this when our book first came out. And we went to auction, super excited. How much money are they gonna offer us for our book? I got 6 kids. So we went to auction, and then the day of auction, our agent ghosted us. He was just radio silent. And he came back and he said, every single editor acknowledged your book is gonna be a bestseller. But they were all scared of getting canceled. They were all scared not only of getting canceled, but of the book being made unavailable on Target and Amazon, which has happened to other books. I think most notably Abigail Schreier's book. And so we were asked, can you take the trans stuff out of your book? And we were like, no, we really can't. And then another editor said, well, can you take the fight message out? Maybe it's just like a feel-good book. No. No, we are 2 Jewish women and New Yorkers at that. It is impossible for us to tone down on a normal subject. But on this, the face of this onslaught is just something we couldn't do. And so, a book proposal is a lot of work. It's 20 pages. We spent months on it, and we decided, you know what? We're just going to shelve it. We're not going to take not enough money, I'm not going to lie, to write a book that we wouldn't even want to read, let alone write. And so we said, let's just table it. And then the Daily Wire came to us and said, we want the book and we welcome the fight. And that's what we did. And so we rushed it to print. So thank you to the Daily Wire for having the courage that no other publisher did, including every single major publisher. I would love to write another book again, so hopefully they will publish my book because, yeah, that's the danger of saying these things in public because I would like to write a future book, but I'm burning every other conservative publisher. So, anywho, when we wrote this book, we wanted to arm parents with the knowledge of the enemy facing American families. And we want to share this message with those of you who share our urge to fight for kids. In our conclusions, we each give our view of what that fight looks like in our individual families. In my family, we've basically gone Galt. So, famous Ayn Rand novel. My kid's favorite actor is Robin Williams. Their favorite book is probably C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia. And their favorite movies are like Mrs. Doubtfire, which BT Dub could never be created now, and Flubber. My kids don't have phones. They will not have phones. They are those sheltered, homeschooled kids that you hear about. And those of you in the room will meet them after this, and they are not weird. Very earnest, but not weird. In Karol's house, she goes the complete opposite direction. She doesn't homeschool. She has 3 kids. And they go to public school and private school. She did pick up her family and move from New York City, from Brooklyn, to Florida, and that was how she kind of protected her children from all of this. They watch movies, they watch television shows, they are completely in this world. And so the two of us, in our conclusion in Stolen Youth, available on Amazon, we talk about how can you raise your child in this climate and come out the other side with kids who are happy and resilient and not brainwashed. And we take totally different paths to get there. But at the end of it, our kids are amazing and they're really nice. And my daughter will marry her son and it will be great. I joke that we every time we all get together, we take pictures of the two of them for the wedding, for the PowerPoint, whatever it will be called then. And I put them on our photo frame, and so I'm trying to really drive it home to her, you and Jack are meant to be. I'm just saying. But we wanted to provide parents with a blueprint to raise emotionally stable and resilient kids in the face of this madness, kids who are able to resist this campaign. And we hope that our work can help parents achieve that because, what else are we doing here if we're not raising emotionally resilient and happy children? That's all I've got. Thank you guys so much. I wrote this at 11 p.m. last night, and I knew I was going to do this to myself or I was going to veer off and chit-chat, so hopefully I'm on time. But thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah, please.
What a great book. What a great bunch of stories, as a parent. My kids, it was 20 years ago, they're in their 30s and 40s now, but things have gotten so much worse. And God bless you for what you're doing, the homeschooling.
Thank you.
Not every mom can do it for a variety of reasons. Maybe she's alone, maybe just economically they need it. So let me ask the first question, and then we'll let you all ask. What about a mom who just can't do that? And she has all the worries that you have. She sees how bad it is. As you said in COVID, that was a blessing in a way. Parents could see on the screen of their children's computers the garbage being taught.
Yeah.
So maybe answer that one first.
Sure.
And then we have a microphone here, so if you'll raise your hand and you call on people,
Sure.
we'll do a few questions.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thank you.
So one of my favorite stories from one of my dear friends who was faced with that situation, totally frankly, they don't want to homeschool, but they can't anyway, even if they wanted to. And so, there's a strange echo now. So this dad made very clear to his private school that he would like to see every bit of curriculum before his kids do. And he bullied the school and did not make any friends. and said, I would like everything. Give me everything. And an important point is he didn't just ask for the stuff that was happening in health class. He was asking for everything. Science, reading. You would be shocked. There was one parent in Austin, Texas, who came to me during their read aloud hour. He found out that his kindergartner had read a book called Swish, 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 Go the Drag Queen's Hips, set to the tune of Wheels on the Bus. And so the parents only found out about that because their kindergartner skipping around the house that day singing, swish, 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 go the drag queen's hips. And the parents were like, I'm sorry, what? What was that? And that was how these parents discovered that this was a read aloud in their kids', carpet time, I think it's called. And so my friend asked for everything. And he doesn't have time, who does, to sit down and look at a year's worth of curriculum all at once. And so he decided to always be 2 weeks ahead. And so every Saturday night he would look at that week's, or actually it would be 2 weeks prior, because he wanted enough time to sort of have action time, basically. And so he noticed that actually during health class, the kids would be learning about human sexuality in a way that was extremely not age appropriate. I don't know what you can say on C-SPAN. I don't want to get bleeped on C-SPAN, but but this is the thing. I have to wonder, how do I describe this curriculum for his first grader where I don't get bleeped on C-SPAN? And I'm not sure how, honestly. It's okay. So it talked about masturbation, how you can adequately masturbate in a way that is pleasurable. This was first grade. So the dad went to the school and said, this is not age appropriate. This curriculum is not age appropriate. And the school said, we are the experts you have entrusted your child to, and we think it is. And so it is. And so dad was not deterred, and he decided to individually approach other parents at pickup and at drop-off and activities over the course of the next few days and said, do you know what they're learning about in this human sexuality? And they're like, and all the other parents said, no, but they knew he was a crazy right-winger because of COVID. And they're like, no, but they don't know. They know what they're doing. And he was like, but do they? Because this is what they're learning. And he showed them one of the YouTube videos that the kids were going to be shown, and the parents were blown away. And so he talked to one or two other parents, and those one or two other parents talked to one or two other parents. And eventually they had, within a few days, 8 or 9 parents who were uncomfortable with this enough to approach the principal, this time as a group, and say, we would like this taken out of the curriculum. And the principal said, we are the experts that you have entrusted with your children, and we know how to properly educate them in human sexuality. Thanks for your thoughts. And so now 7 parents are livid, and they talk to everyone else in the class, and every single parent reapproached, this is the 3rd time, the principal of a private school to whom they are paying tuition, and it's not an insignificant amount, and said, we are all uncomfortable with this. And when every single parent were making plans to pull their kid out of class, because that's what the school said, that was their compromise. If you come here and pull your kid out and you sit with your kid while this lesson is being taught, that's how you get your kid out of it. We're not going to provide anything alternative for your kid. You have to. So you have to take time off of work. And so every single parent talked amongst themselves in their WhatsApp chat, and they said, who has some flexibility? Who can go in and watch every single kid while the teacher teaches this lesson to an empty room? And at that point, and at only that point, did the principal back down. And the principal backed down and said, we will be teaching this lesson next year because we know what is best for your children. And so that experience taught every single parent in that classroom a very valuable lesson. They think that the kids belong to the school. They think that they know what is best. And so my friend is not the only person pre-screening curriculum now. And if any good came from it, it is that. It red-pilled an entire classroom. And it didn't just red pill those parents, because those parents have kids in other grades in that school, and there's other parents in the school who are now doing the same in their kids' classrooms. But you really have to be tuned in, and this is why when we tried to sell this book and the editor told us take out the fight message, like, what is the answer if it's not fight? You have to pay attention, but then you have to fight, and you have to be willing to be labeled the lunatic. You have to be willing to be labeled the bigot, because at the end of the day, what do you care more about, your child or your reputation? And if it's the latter, like, why did you have kids? My perspective. Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, that was fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. What was the New York Magazine title and author, please?
Sarah Jones' Children Are Not Property. And it was published mid-April of 2020. This is 2023, right? Yeah, 2023. I know what year it is. Anyone else? I have one other thing, since there's a 1.5-year-old in this room. I want to drive home for parents just how young this happens. There is a famous YouTube personality who I would compare, like, my generation's Mr. Rogers. There's a famous YouTube personality, Miss Rachel. That's what her name is, yes. She has a non-binary member of her cast who uses they, them pronouns, and she wears a chest binder. And when she introduces stuffies on this YouTube channel, she introduces them with they, them pronouns. She hasn't gone into it yet, but this is how they sow the seeds. Even at this age, they're introducing the idea that you don't have to have pronouns, that sometimes people are neither man nor woman. And this is something that when I was talking to people in the mental health field was incredibly disorienting for young minds. Your brain, 3 and under, is forming rapidly. And if your brain is stripped of the ability to categorize people into these very basic ways, man and woman, one of my 2 and 3-year-olds' favorite activities always, I'm on my 4th 3-year-old, is always to sit at the table and say, mommy is a girl, daddy is a boy. Bubby is a girl, Zadie is a boy. This is how they make sense of the world, is by categorizing. And we are taking away from an entire generation that ability to understand the world around them and to categorize it in this manner. We are performing a sociological experiment, the likes of which would never be approved by an ethics committee. What happens to developing brains when you take away this basic building block of understanding the world around them? We're going to find out. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be great. Happy to take more questions, but the appearance of that 1.5-year-old inspired me to make that point.
I appreciate everything you're saying and doing. I've seen you interviewed on a couple other podcasts. So I'm at the age now where my kids are in college, and I'm trying to help them critically think through a lot of this stuff. Question is, I've recently seen some people sort of connecting, and this is not, I know you didn't really focus on this, so if you don't know a lot of it about it, it's okay. Connecting, I'm always interested in what's behind everything, right?
Yeah.
Why, the why. And James Lindsay has gone into a lot of that.
I was just thinking James Lindsay.
But recently I saw a journalist, and as she was talking, she was connecting a lot of the financial part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you speak to that at all?
So I can, but not intelligently enough to fake it. It's huge. So there was an incredible New York Post piece about this. Vivek Ramaswamy wrote a book called Woke Inc. And the basic idea is that all of these corporations have social credit scores, and you want to obtain a good score. And so, I mean, I think everyone knows what happened to Bud Light. They decided to have a transgender individual not act as a spokesperson, but they kind of cheered this person's persona and this person's, I mean, to be frank, act. This person's act isn't just to pretend to be a woman, but it's mocking women. It is, if you've ever watched Dylan Mulvaney's videos, the first video was, so this is my first day of girlhood, and by the way, like no warning sign, no warning flags that this person portrays himself as a girl, not as a woman, as a girl. Red flag after red flag. It is weird. And again, that is something that you're not allowed to say publicly anymore without being called a bigot. But I'm sorry, a grown man who pretends to be a prepubescent girl, if I would not leave that person alone in a room with a child. Just like I wouldn't have left my children in a room with Michael Jackson way back then. Same danger. So Bud Light decided to stand behind this person and put this person's face on a beer can and, cheer this person's transition into girlhood. And they did it. It is thought they did this because it increases their social credit score. The only way to sort of get points in this system is by standing behind campaigns of this nature that are almost always LGBT related, but more T. And this is another question that I sort of have for, the gay rights movement, and there's definitely been a fractioning of the movement to separate LGB and T, because it is very different. So I recommend Vivek's book, and like as an aside, I recommended it for purchase in my local library. I live in Montgomery County, Maryland. All of you familiar? Yep, it's a great county. And I requested my book, and they said no. It was number 19 on Amazon at that moment. And a local activist, and I hope I'm not like blowing him up, but he will be writing about this. His sort of handle is Clean Slate Moco. So hopefully I'm like scooping his scoop, but I'm also promoting him, so maybe it all evens out. But he made a public records request and said, what kind of books are you approving and what kind of books are you not approving? And that filing of the public records request for Montgomery County libraries inspired them to have a change of heart. And so Montgomery County Public Libraries will have 4 copies of Stolen Youth in the system. They have 63 copies of Anti-Racist Board Book, but they have 4 of mine. And they've been approving all of my other requests now since that first initial denial. But I mean, we give action items and action ideas for people in our book, and that is one of them. Request books at your library, balance out the scales, and don't take no for an answer. And that's just like the general lesson, like don't take no for an answer. But I requested Vivek's. This is how I got to that tangent. I requested Vivek's book, and I will be reading it, and I recommend everyone read it if you're interested in that topic. Yeah.
I think
at a time.
so that we have time to do the book signing before everyone has to leave. We'll wrap up the questions here, but we'll talk informally after.
Yeah,
I just
absolutely.
want to thank you for inspiring people and giving them ideas for how to fight this. I think that's the good news. More and more people are standing up courageously.
Yeah.
In fact, our most popular campus lecturer right now is Riley Gaines,
Yes.
who is a champion swimmer. She's been on TV a lot, and some of
Yep.
the other athletes are finally doing it too.
Yeah, that's how you got to do it.
Oh,
At
yes.
no small amount of personal risk.
Absolutely. Well,
Reputational,
right.
physical.
She's graduated, but the girls on the team still, they
Yeah.
threaten them. Your scholarships, you're off the team.
Yeah, well, she
If
was
you-
physically assaulted.
Yes, she was. That was
Yeah.
San Francisco. Where else?
Yep.
San Francisco State. But when she speaks for us, we pay extra for security, so nobody will touch her. They can shout at her.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
there she is, and here's the guy who beat her
Yep.
that high. Oh, surprise, surprise.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it's not just swimming, it's soccer, it's rowing,
Yep.
and then the women's prisons, it goes on and on. But finally, people, on this one, it's people of all political views, from what I've
Yeah.
seen. They have to dress with these guys in the locker room. I mean, it's
Yeah.
totally crazy. But I want to thank you so much for your work, for your writing. And I
Thank you.
have a couple of gifts for you. And this one is especially appropriate. This is our limited edition coffee mug. with the famous saying, read it, this is Clare Boothe Luce,
Courage is the ladder on which all the other virtues mount.
and you have courage to do this.
Thank you.
And I want to give you my book, which is similar, but really just about raising conservative daughters, and you can't just sit back anymore.
Did you
know
sign
this.
it?
I did. I
Okay,
signed
thank
it to you and your husband, because I
Oh,
know
look at you go. Thank
he's
you.
a key part of this also.
He is, yes.
And I just want to thank you so much. There's some book sales outside, and you'll sign them.
Absolutely.
And there's some good lunch and good cookies. Jeannie got good cookies today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.